You might be looking at this title and wondering what this episode's about. Well, I mean, it's about the rise of conservatism, but what does what is conservatism? And often you'll hear this a lot when regarding to political news across the entire world. What does it mean to be conservative, to be left or right leaning? What does it mean to be liberal? And mainly what this episode is about, what is the rise of conservatism in the United States? And what does it mean for us who are living in the United States? Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Vic the Random. Really sorry last week got really busy. Had a debate tournament, and actually this week had a debate tournament too. Actually, I got number 1 in speaker points, so. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's random quote generator. The quote of the week is, "Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." Okay, first of all, let's talk about the idea of conservatives and liberals. Now, in our world, obviously, we have a government that is in control of we, the people. The government sets rules on what we can and can't do. Currently, in the United States, there is free speech. The government has basically said, you can say whatever you want without fear of being punished. The government has not set any rules on what we can say and what we can't say. Now, conservatism is essentially saying we don't want the government to make rules for our people. We don't want to have the government involved in our daily lives. Conservatives believe that government involvement is bad. Conservatives believe that, if we just let the things go unimpeded by the government, then things will eventually find some sort of balance. For example, there are many billionaires in the world of America. However, there are also many people who are struggling to live. Conservatives believe that the government shouldn't tax the rich extra because if the government does extra money, if the government taxes the rich, they'll just move to another country where the taxes are lower. And if the government doesn't tax the rich, the rich people can provide jobs to many poor people. And that will uplift and give them more money. See, the government doesn't have to do anything because the big rich people will provide money to the poorer people. And this idea of conservatism is essentially, once again, the government doesn't have to do anything. The government can kind of just sit by and the people in the market will work things out. After all, we are a very capitalist economy. Money is above everything. You will do things because you believe that you will get more money. And these people, these conservatives, believe that this money, this desire for money will eventually balance things out. The government doesn't have to get involved. Now, you will also hear conservatives be referred to as the right, leaning to the right. Now, what about liberals? Liberals, on the other hand, lean more towards the side on which the government should get involved in everyday affairs. Going back to our tax problem that I presented earlier, liberals believe that the rich are not going to create new jobs for poor people. The rich are going to try to extract every penny out of the poor person as possible without making the poor person revolt. There's not going to be any chance for the poor person. So we, as the government, have to step in to tax the rich more and use those taxes to benefit the poor people. Now, the liberals also argue that adding taxes to rich people won't cause them to leave because they have set up these giant business empires here in America. Now, obviously, these are two very opposite sides, and you can go way down the spectrum of liberalism, essentially going into complete government control, aka communism. far left, if you go all the way to the far left, you're saying the government controls everything you do, you say, you eat, you drink. A little bit less towards that communist side is socialism. You believe that the government should have very strong powers, that they should be able to take money from the rich and give it to the poor. Now, going on to the conservative side, we can see that there really isn't like a fancy name for it like communism or socialism, but essentially these conservatives are like, we do not want communism. We do not want the government in control of our everyday lives. We will do anything and everything to prevent that from happening. These are called ultra conservatives, and they will often try to prevent the government from doing anything at all in people's lives. Their goal is to prevent the economy from spiraling into communism. Now, what does this have to do with the rise and fall of conservatism in the United States? Well, of course, that is after the break. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Random Fact Generator. Did you know that a giraffe's heart is about 2 feet long? I mean, I guess we never really think about it, but bigger animals have bigger hearts. And giraffes are very big animals, so they have very big hearts. Okay, so what about the rise of conservatism in the United States? We have to go all the way back to World War I to learn about this. During World War I, the government needed a lot of supplies, and they needed to mobilize very quickly. They needed to make sure that all railroad tracks were synchronized and were able to deliver supplies across the country for war very quickly. So actually, what the government did is they nationalized the rail industry. They basically took the entire rail industry and was like, hey, the government controls the rail industry now. And this was very actually beneficial for the war, because when the government has control of all of the rail industries, it can very efficiently transport goods around the country. It can very easily defend against an invasion and send necessary supplies around the country to better attack other countries. However, over the course of these wars, the US became increasingly a part of everyday civilians' lives. Obviously, taking over the entire railroad industry is not something to be taken lightly. It means that the government is in control of how goods are transported, how goods are shipped, how goods are managed. And obviously, people were afraid that this would turn into communism. Because in communism, the government controls the movement of goods, how goods are distributed to citizens. And railroad, government having control over railroad means they can control how these goods are distributed. So many people were afraid that the US was slowly dissolving into communism. And as a result, many liberals began starting to think on more conservative sides. One such person was President Nixon. In his campaign, he essentially made the argument that he would not have a big government. He said, we will make sure the government does not get involved in your lives anymore. And he won the American election. However, things got interesting right here. Because as soon as Nixon won the election, he went ahead and did a couple of things. He passed the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. He formed the National Highway Traffic Safety Association and made many new additions to the Environmental Protection Act. Now, this does not sound a lot like Nixon's ideas and Nixon's promises that he made in his campaign. Nixon promised that he would not put the government in people's lives, and here he was introducing laws that restricted people's lives. He made laws such as EPA and the Clean Water and Clean Air Act saying you couldn't pollute local lands and waters. People didn't like that because they knew, oh, the government is still controlling more and more of our everyday lives. We need to stop the government. Now, in addition, during this time, during the 1900s, there was still a very large hatred against certain groups of people. There was a lot of racism and still a lot of sexism in the world around us in the 1930s and even continuing to today. And a lot of things happened during Nixon's administration, primarily Roe v. Wade. And the Roe v. Wade agreement basically put the government into more people's lives. During Roe v. Wade, the government was like, hey, we're installing this new set of rules that you have to follow. And in adding these new restrictions, however, it gave women more freedom. It gave women more say about their own lives and about their own bodies. But again, people criticized that. People thought the government is getting more involved in our lives. Once again, during this time, people were very racist against African Americans in the United States. They thought that African Americans shouldn't get the same rights as white Americans. And they saw that, again, President Nixon was passing laws that said African Americans get the same rights. And a lot of people were like, hey, the government is, once again, getting more involved in our lives. Now, of course, there are two sides to this argument. One side of the argument is that a lot of people just saw how laws were making better equal rights for men, for women, and more equal rights for African Americans. And they were like, we don't want more equal rights. We want to be superior. We, the white male, want to still be superior. And so they used conservatism, not passing laws, as to their advantage. Because if the government doesn't pass laws to increase the rights of women and African Americans, then the white male has everything to gain. So some people believe that a lot of people use conservatism to restrict equal rights. But then again, there were many people who still thought along the lines of conservatism because they truly and deeply feared about communism. People didn't want communism and often would try to do everything they could to avoid that. Now, in addition, during this time, less children were being born. And during this time, there were more divorces than marriages. People were seeing how there was a new movement in equal rights for everyone. And they thought, hey, this is affecting our very own family values. This is the idea, of a Christian family to have a very long, happy marriage, to have a large family with many children. And many people saw the laws that the administration to be passing to improve equal rights as a threat to this. Now, once again, there are two sides to this. It could be that people were really fearful for communism, or it could be that people just didn't want equal rights for all types of people. And so that is one side of the part of the rise to conservatism, right? People thought the government was getting too big and passing laws, and they didn't like it. They thought the government was getting too involved in their lives. Now, here's the other side, because towards the end of President Nixon's term, even though it was very clear that he was going to win the election, in a poll, his opponent only had 12% of public support, he decided to break into, or not him, but rather employees that worked for him, decided to break into McGovern's office, which was the other presidential nominee. And after this break-in, President Nixon sent hush money to the FBI. They were like, hey, FBI, here's a bunch of money. Just please don't spread the word about this. But of course, people found out. And they were outraged that the president had abused his power to stop from uncovering the truth. And this does sound, once again, a lot like communism. People saw that the government was getting more powerful. Many liberals had made the argument that government control is good for the people. It benefits the people. But when the government uses money to hush up a horrible crime, breaking into your opponent's campaign office is not right, then people saw how this was a clear example of the government abusing their power. It was a clear example of the fact that the governments don't always use their power for good, and it was more of a reason to restrict governmental power. And it was these factors, right? The fact that many people saw that the government was actually doing harm. They were cheating. They were sending hush money to the FBI. Many people were afraid that the US was starting to slowly dissolve into communism because of the extra control they put over the citizens. And many people saw the increasing activism in equal rights. And they saw how the government getting involved was causing those equal rights. And they thought, the government doesn't get involved, there won't be as much equal rights, we can hold on to our power. And because of those main reasons, a lot more conservatism started sprouting up in the United States. Many more of the following presidents started arguing for the fact that the government should not be engaging in daily civilian lives. And today, hopefully, you can see a lot of that playing out today. Now, I'm not trying to say whether or not conservatism or liberalism is better or worse than the other. They both have their own opinions, and many people are somewhere in the middle between conservatism and liberalism. Hopefully, I've given you a little more insight into these two different sides of a lot of what the world operates on today. So maybe when you learn more about Venezuela or Argentina or about different elections in Europe, maybe you will be able to understand a little more about what the issues in the world are and how do each of the candidates, each of the people running for election, propose to solve this problem. Is it with more government control or less government control? And hopefully, with the information you've learned today, you can start thinking about which ways you agree with and which ways you disagree with. And maybe have more conversations and discussions about your thoughts and about your opinions. Credits! This episode was created and directed by Vikram Dave Rue, script written on Google Docs, recorded on voice memos. I have a Rodecaster Duo with a Blue Yeti microphone. Once again, I would like to mention I am trying to go for quality over quantity. I am still aiming for a 2-week schedule, but if things do get very, very busy, I really don't want to rush my episodes. For reference, you can check out victherandom.com/EP episode predictor if you would like to see when my next episode is uploading. Stay tuned. See you soon.